one of the things we forgot to do was to add categories to our restaurants. So if we click on write a review here, you'll see that we don't have a way for us to add categories here. We don't have any fields for that. So let's think about this for a little bit. When you're creating a category, that's probably something that the web administrator does, right? It's not something that we're going to provide a front-facing interface to create a category. It's just something that you do on the back end, because we're not going to let users do that. This is just something that the database administrator does, or that the web administrator does on the back end side of it. And so how do we create a category if there's no way to get to it in the application? Well, that's very simple. If we go into our files here and go into our seeds file, this is where you do all of that processing. And so basically when you run the seeds file, it'll do whatever you want it to do in here. So if we say category.create, we want to create a category of Italian. The name will be Italian. And now how do we do that? Well, we just do a rake db seed to run all of the processes in here. If we go into our Rails console, you'll see that it was created. So it created a record of Italian in our category table. So that's how you would create a category on the back end side of it, is through seeds here. Now how do we tie this back into the restaurants? So if we go into schema, you'll see that there's no way for us to really tie a restaurant into a category. What we'll have to do is create an index. So we'll say Rails G migration add category index to restaurants. So there we go. And now if we go into there, all we have to say is add reference restaurants to the restaurants table, adding the category, and say index true. And let's just take a look at our schema right here. This is what it looks like right now. Now when we run this, it's going to update that for us, and you'll take a look and see what it did. So it essentially just added this category ID column on the restaurants table, and it says add index restaurants category ID right here. So it's indexing this category ID into categories right here. And so let's take a look at adding this into our form here. So we'll want to add it into our new restaurants right here. So where do we want to put it? Let's put it right here of select category ID, because this category ID is now a column on the restaurant table. And category.all map do f, find the name of f and ID. So this is basically grabbing all of the categories, and that way you can set the category ID here. Now before we even run this, we need to go into our controller and add category ID in here, and actually put a comma right there so that it can take it in as a parameter. Now let's go into our form here, do a refresh, and there we have it. And it doesn't look that pretty, but let's, the next thing to do here is just go like that for now, so it looks a little bit better. We'll actually want to do that before it. There you go. Looks a little bit better. Again, you can clean this up if you'd like. So now if we say pasta bar Italian, create restaurant, we go down here and we have category of Italian. Well, that's hard coded, so let's go into our show page and see that it says Italian here, but if we say at restaurant.category.name, now do a refresh, it should still say Italian, But if that ever changes, and this is just going to do some Ruby stuff right here real quick. So category, let's just say A equals category find that first one. So it finds Italian right here. Update name to Asian. Great, it went through and did that. Do a refresh, now it changes to Asian. So this is the power of adding indexes to your tables versus just setting it. I know there are a lot of tutorials out there that'll have you set it here. So in this create action, they'll say something like restaurant category ID equals category ID. And what happens when you do something like that is that whenever the category changes, well, it doesn't really change this category ID column right here. It doesn't really change that because you're not referencing it. You're just setting it once you create it, and that's it. So if that category name ever changes, it won't ever change your the name of your category ID column right here. So that's the power of using an index versus setting it from the get-go, because that way you can always just reference that table versus just actually setting it at the creation of that record and never being able to update that when the category is updated on the category table. So that might be going into a little bit deeper of Ruby and how it works, but just know that this is the correct way of setting the ID, of adding an index versus doing what I just showed you here. Because I know there are a lot of tutorials out there that teach you how to do it this way, and that's not the correct way to do it. Alright, and so now that we have our categories here, I think we're good to go. We can start adding the rest of the information here on our restaurants.